picking up what seems to be like a real central truth is that spending a lot of time and validation on the PRD, the time you spend on that is extremely valuable because the way these things are working is that they're going to lose track of all the components. So if you could break it down into categories and break those categories down into categories, into the smallest element that is testable, that's what you would put out at a time for these basically all these platforms, but even more so for things like Lovable and Bolt and stuff like that. From my only 20 days of experience, so like I'm not like crazy expert. That when they're developing their PRD, obviously you use LLMs, you chat with them, you tell them what you're developing because they know what a PRD is. But then you could even like take it to deep research. You could take it into these like super agents like a Manus and GenSpark and stuff, and really just invest in having that framework at the beginning. Yeah, and if it's something you want to sell, you obviously have to validate it first. That's an idea worth developing. That's a big thing I've seen people like stumble on. Yeah, so Claude Code is crazy. Things that are like very helpful along the path, like having an LLM, like a chat UI with projects or custom GPTs, they could have on the side, just like taking notes as you're going along and just having it as an external tracking of what you're doing. That would be like alongside with good documentation. If you have a change log inside the code itself, that's something I find to be powerful, starting with Bolt or not, or you just want to start from scratch. These IDEs, for example, Visual Studio and the forks like Windsurf and Cursor, they're extremely powerful. And they have their different like strengths and weaknesses. And then alongside those, they have extensions, which I'm sure you've heard of since you've been doing it a while. Things like Augment Code, I've heard very good things about. Rue Klein, and I've been using something called Kilo, which is supposed to be combining Rue and Klein extension. And that adds another layer of agentic, help. Like they have orchestration, which can help it change between its different agents in the system. Because it has agent for planning, or wait, not planning. Yeah, I think planning, architecture, coding, and debugging. So orchestration like can decide where to jump for you if you have the budget for it. I'm sure you've heard of Claude Code if you've been doing this. It's very powerful. Claude Code is very powerful. Obviously, Opus is doing very powerful things. So if you set that up, well, it's something I've seen other people do and I've started testing is just like having your IDE, whether it's Cursor or Windsurf, and then having an extension if it helps you, and then having your remote window running Claude Code. That way you can kind of divide the jobs between these different agents. Now, again, like the scale and the scope is going to affect things greatly. Like if you have a very simple concept, you're not going to run into issues. But if you have a lot of features, a lot of depth, and by the way, if you make mistakes as far as structuring it and stuff like that, you could run into headaches. I'm noticing this, even with my background and even playing with it already almost 3 weeks. When running into problems, don't don't repeat over and over trying to solve it. You have to take steps back. You have to be very quickly ready. If you spend like an hour just getting stuck in one spot, it's a point like to step back and say like, and you don't, if you're not a coder, you could just say it to the AI, this isn't working. We need to step back. We need to understand like what this component does that you're working on. And by the way, if you're working on a component at a time, you shouldn't get too lost, right? So if you're working on a component at a time at the minimal level of development, then you could back up pretty easily and say, okay, this isn't working. Let's try to redesign this component. And if you still run into issues, you may have to even go back further. And that usually is just an indication that you didn't split things enough or you did test things enough along the way. Yeah, design, I started playing with this. You could use there's a bunch of different services. I'm sure you heard of them. The 21st Dev, there's a whole list of them you could get. And you can use components from there to add a lot of, make your website design-wise stand out and really have captivating front. So making sure that the design, you take the time on the front end to take care of those nuances, and you could use these external libraries, depending on which your framework is for the code, to really accentuate things, like to make 3D effects and visual effects and, being sensitive of what kind of font you use and organization and easy to navigate. And they make a huge difference in the quality of the final product. Like tons of documentation, like be overly document and try to keep track of your documentation. That way you know what's going on, where it's going on, where these documents are at, what they're doing. The quick summary, what's that? And just off the top of my head, this is what I could think of, Hope that's helpful though. Take care.